Hello, everybody. Welcome to our coffee house this evening, or wherever you find yourself. We've got lovely international folks in this community as well. Good to see lots of friendly faces. Wait for more people to trickle in. We are going to get started with some community guidelines. So thank you all for coming to our coffee house. We're going to be discussing our experience in direct action from the front lines, and we're also going to be organizing for our Mayday for Money event. I want to specifically welcome everyone who has not been with Alliance for Just Money before. If you can raise your hand if you have that inclination. If we have any newcomers in this space, we want to say that you are welcome in this arena, and we're all working towards a more just economy. Hey, Katie, you're a panelist, so you're going to get a chance to introduce yourself. Thank you for coming. I also wanted to include a short land acknowledgement and time acknowledgement. So let's all take a minute to ground ourselves in this space we are, acknowledging that we are all probably on stolen land. I'm in the El Paso, Texas area of the Manso Antigua people, and we are working on decolonizing these spaces. Also including a time acknowledgement. For that, I mean, acknowledging that we're all living in this crazy world of a crisis right now, and we may wish that it's not happening in our time, but all we can do is decide what we do with the time given to us. So I want to acknowledge the occupation of Palestine and the war setting, and just take a minute to acknowledge that while we are working for peace in various sectors, our work in monetary reform is also a crucial work in working for peace, because it is one of the primary causes of war and militarism, is the profit that these enterprises give to a handful of people. So with that, I'll go into some more general community guidelines. We are a space that's open to diverse perspectives and identities. We want everyone to recognize social and power dynamics, and we are all open to discomfort and learning. It's perfectly fine to agree to disagree, and always exercise respect and compassion. These guidelines also apply to written forms as we go through and comment on these forums later on social media or whatnot. We need to be sure that we are speaking thoughtfully, commenting thoughtfully, writing thoughtfully, listening attentively to everyone's opinion, and a really crucial one, to respect our needs. This group is run by the power of volunteers and the power of people, and we are all human with physical and mental limitations, so just be gentle with yourself and others in this learning space. I'm including a quote here from Donella Meadows to set the tone for our panel discussion today, and say that the scarcest resource is not oil, metals, clean air, capital, labor, or technology. It is our willingness to listen to each other and learn from each other and seek the truth rather than to seek to be right. So we all have our own individual truths. We're going to go through some of these. I'll stamp share and go to our panelists and guide you through today's learning objectives as we talk through direct action. We're going to talk about some of the main ingredients of direct action, roles and preparations. And let's put our panelists on so they can all introduce themselves. I'm going to spotlight some folks here. And let's start with a quick question. In 3 minutes or so, let's have us all introduce ourselves and our current role in the movement and our experience in direct action. So I guess since I'm already on the mic, my name is Fernanda Lugo. I'm with the Alliance for Just Money in the role of outreach and social media. And I'm happy to say that I was with all of these other lovely faces in the New York End Fossil Fuel March and following demonstrations in DC. My current role in the movement is connecting these different branches to the work of Just Money and getting a democratic money system. And I will ask our fellow panelists to introduce ourselves, starting in alphabetical order. Alfonso, could you go?
Yes, my name is Alfonso Saldaña. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently living in the ancestral lands of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe, which is now known as Brownsville, Texas. And I serve as one of Multuamen's national co-directors. Do I get to pick who goes next? Right.
On to you, Greg. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and
Greg Coleridge? Greetings, everyone. Greg Coleridge, he, him, from Northeast Ohio, Greater Cleveland area, ancestral land of the Erie and other tribes. Also one of the co-directors. Good to be with you all. Peace. How about Katie?
Hello, I am Katie, she, her. I'm from Pensacola, and we are living on stolen land from a tribe called Pensacola, as well as the Appalachian tribe. I am the newest member for Move to Amend, and I'm still feeling my way, but I'm so impressed with how passionate and wonderful everyone is. And our trip to New York and DC was life-changing, really. Go ahead, Jenny, you're next.
And you're muted.
Thank you. Hi, glad to be here and to see some recognizable faces too. My name is Jenny Spanos, she, her. I'm in Pensacola as well. And I am one of the national co-directors for the Move to Amend Coalition. And part of the actions that went on in New York and DC, and have been part of the struggle for justice for quite some time now. Glad to be here with you all.
Thank you. So to start, let's tell a bit of the story of what happened in New York. This was a march titled To End Fossil Fuels. And there were several chants and banners that related to that topic, and there was divestment campaigns. I want to ask our lovely group here, what brought you to that march, and what kind of energy did you feel that march had that propelled the movement forward? What is the power of these direct action and organizing experiences when you're on the ground with 75,000 people who participate in a demonstration? What is that like? Anyone would like to start that?
I could start. So the energy, I mean, for me, it was very charged with good energy, purpose, and everyone, as you were saying, were chanting. And one thing that resonated was the urgency to combat the destructive influence of fossil fuels. And as we were talking to people, they right away connected the dots between fossil fuel corporations and the power that they have to influence politics and just in general on the whole aspect of climate catastrophe. And was there a second part to the question?
How does this experience, how do you feel that it propels a movement forward? Currently, there's been more push on the petition to end fossil fuels, and there's definitely a continual conversation. But I see our role as Move to Amend on the ground was to get to this core root of the problem of corporate greed. Do you feel that our section of the demonstration was able to bring attention to this?
Yeah, I really think so. So I think there were like four main objectives to the march. One was to stop federal approvals for fossil fuel projects, phase out fossil fuels. I think another one was to declare a climate emergency and to provide a just transition. And I think all of those perfectly mirror the goals for Move to Amend, which are to advocate for the We the People amendment and change. I ask for real systemic and constitutional change that seeks to end those corrosive influences of corporations in our political and environmental decision-making process. So like, yeah, like I was telling you, when we were talking to people effortlessly, people brought things together, piece it together, and they recognize how corporate entities, like the fossil fuel giants, um, are using these constitutional rights, allowing them to exploit our environment and our communities and so on.
Thank you. Great answer. Katie, Jenny, or Greg, if you want to tell us your experience at the march, how you felt our movement grew from having so many people on the ground seeing the Constitution and the root cause.
I think you're maybe muted, Katie.
Back up what Alfonso said as far as connecting the dots. I mean, that was easy to do, and to point people in the direction of Move to Amend and the Constitution, and being surrounded by so much youth and energy, and being able to build, connect our movement with their movement. I mean, it's all we're all after the same end goal, so it was definitely exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was a very exciting time. And I think that it was also a great learning experience for myself. It was my first time in a large demonstration. I've only been involved in local rallies and like a march that's one block just on our downtown strip, also for climate change. So it was really a learning experience to see just how big they can get and how many people can be activated to be behind one great cause. So I want to guide us into the next question, which would be, what lessons did you take home from the demonstrations in DC and in New York? And how could these lessons guide those of us who are considering a future demonstration, which we are currently planning for at Chicago? What lessons can you tell us?
I could maybe try to take a gander at answering that. So I think also defining what is successful, right? The energy in New York was super high energy. There was that urgency. They were able to convey the urgency and the need. There was also a specific event that they were going there to raise awareness for. So I think defining what you consider successful, what it is that you want to accomplish when while there, is really important. Having those clear demands and messaging is really important. And I think that one of the reasons that this march was so what I would consider success is that they were able to bring together such a diverse, generationally diverse, differently abled, culturally diverse, economically diverse? Do you know how do how can we have people who wouldn't be able to afford to get there? How can we get them there if they are feeling passionate and want to participate? Those kind of things. I think they did a really good job in this action to answer some of those calls, and people were organizing in their own communities, right? Establishing, getting a bus together and people pitching in, and then getting the funding to grant for some folks to be able to come on. So, and also having dedicated paid staff. I know that, you know, our organizations are powered by volunteers, and that's fantastic. But, you know, having that dedicated, coordinated, paid staff is also important, and bringing in those coalitions, identifying their allies early, and sending out the call to join, and getting, you know, as many people involved in the planning and the execution of all of it. Not, that's kind of a harsh word, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to avoid the violence language, but sometimes it's hard in our current sphere of language. So those are just kind of some of the things that I felt they did well for this particular action. So defining what it is that you want to accomplish is really important.
I'll pick up a little on that if I might. I think certainly what Jenny has said is spot on about New York. DC was a little bit different. And I think actually in thinking about lessons learned and what can be replicated or specifically taken away from DC for what it is being planned in Chicago, it's maybe more akin to what happened in DC, because Move to Amend and the Alliance for Just Money was not part of a much larger event, but you know, we created our own from beginning to end, which is very similar to what is being schemed in Chicago. And so that involves, you know, thinking big, thinking small, thinking ideologically, conceptually, and thinking detail-wise, doing everything from, you know, getting the permits to figuring out what our, you know, call is going to be to inspire people to show up, and everything in between. So, I mean, there's all those little detail things that if you don't do well, it just will not necessarily turn out to be what you want. So obviously thinking about goals, who do you want there? What are you, again, trying to achieve? In the case of DC, we were trying to accomplish a couple of things all at the same time, compacted in a very small period of time, similar to, I think, what Chicago is being planned for, one day or a day and a half. You know, we try to do some street action, trying to attract people to it, trying to communicate, trying to build some solidarity, trying to build some community, doing some education, showing our strength and power that comes through numbers, and hell's bells, having fun. So you try to build all those features into an event like it. I think what's really important in doing these kinds of events is, you know, so much energy goes into planning them, but they are oftentimes planned sort of in a vacuum. How do they fit with what you're already doing? How do they add to what you're already doing? And then what do you take away from that? What is going to be the next thing? How can this be conceived of as sort of a stepping stone, so that when you're doing something, it goes like this? You know, you're always going up. It's not just going like this, you know, just sort of horizontal, but you're trying to build, and that this is just one step, a very important step, that just simply doing virtual things like we're doing, you know, as valuable as they are and need to be done, simply can't accommodate that, because you're not in the same space and generating and building upon all that energy from pressing the flesh, which is so incredibly important. And that's what those events do so well. So it's just thinking about, you know, what is the role and what do we hope to achieve doing this that can't be accomplished in doing other tactics that builds upon our strategy. So thinking strategically, and how, you know, what's the next step and the step beyond that.
Well said. Thank you, Greg. So I think we might have skipped defining direct action, but I kind of assumed from the great attention that some of these marches and demonstrations have had in the past, direct action is that making the movement visual and present on our streets, and that is a, as you say, a good stepping stone to finding more people to join and build the movement, but also having concrete demands that are like blocking the way of people who need to go do their jobs, or being an inconvenience or a disturbance to people in power is also a form of direct action. So as we hold these thoughts in our minds, I also want to get to the hard question, which is, what is the greatest obstacle to having a direct action and demonstration in a peaceful way that builds the movement and is also aware of keeping our movement safe and accessible to everybody? Anyone who wants to hop in and answer.
Well, for me, personally, I think one of the biggest worst obstacle or problems that arise very early in the process was the tediousness of filing for permits. I did not know that there were like subcategories, and like the malls, the national malls were not part of municipal police. So it was not very clear, and the fear of either getting shut down or potentially arrest, all that, it was a big factor for me. So sorting that out and maybe doing that ahead of time to ensure that everything is um, ready for that day would be a good takeaway, as well as prepare for worst case scenarios like counter protesters. Luckily, during the demonstrations in DC, we didn't experience any of that, although there were a few people that might not have necessarily aligned with what we were saying, but they were peaceful. At the New York March, however, there was one individual shouting at the crowd, although the police were fast to ask him to leave. But yeah, just keeping that in mind and planning for worst case scenarios, like having a first aid kit, all that, to ensure the safety of our participants. And something I also would like to highlight is that during the New York March, we had a designated hub leader. In our case, we had Janie, who was very diligent, asking us how everyone's doing, checking in on everyone. So that is also very, very important to keep in mind as you're planning a demonstration.
And also, yeah, I mean, our number one goal was making sure that our crew was, and our team was, hydrated, and, because this was a massive visual we used, right? And carrying it down the streets, we couldn't even fully extend it because it would have hit the lights, the traffic lights and things like that. The roads were supposed to be clear, and they weren't. So going down certain roads in Manhattan, we had to turn sideways again with this massive, heavy wind, fighting with the wind as well. But other actions I've been to, depending on what exactly is planned to bring awareness to this Mayday for money. You're going to the Federal Reserve, who's going to come out in riot gear for this kind of thing? It's generally not the peaceful protesters. It depends on what kind of nonviolent direct action you're planning. Or you had mentioned some street art performance, that kind of thing. Are you planning to bring people from all over the country? Are you gonna,
we're gonna get into our outline for Mayday for Money in a bit. I love that that picture got shared in our chat. If everybody had a chance to view what we're referring to as our big visual that was marched down the streets of New York. It was this huge banner of the Constitution. This was one ingredient of the march that really got people to bring their attention to some of these root causes behind the concept of ending fossil fuels. And it's a thing to hold in our mind as an ingredient for a good direct action. There's also been like light displays or projecting on buildings. Those were all some experiences that have been seen and used and practiced in direct action. So the other ingredients are like those law things Alfonso mentioned, filing permits, very tedious process that we're working through. And thank you for reminding us about having a first aid kit. I'm remembering from my experience on the streets and doing a lot of the chanting, one great limitation there was having enough water. So I'll definitely add that to our planning list as we prepare for a larger rally and demonstration that we're going to be planning. I wanted to share this screen of some other direct action roles that can be seen, and advise you all that we have launched our volunteer forum for Mayday for Money, and that is at the link monetaryalliance.org/Mayday. And if you click down to volunteer, you will get to this volunteer form. And some of the things that we're looking to ask people to consider helping with are the marketing, outreach, design, art builds. All of these like posters and stuff that people carry to a march have to be planned in advance and prepared for people who are just arriving on the streets and are like, hey, what's that? And they can pick up a banner and also take part in the march. From a toolkit I found on direct action, there's also might be a need to have legal observers, getaway drivers, people to transport the materials. I want to say a large thank you to the crew in New York that supported our stay and housing, and also provided us with space to keep and store all of our big materials that had to be used for this demonstration. So all important considerations. Any other thoughts about your experience in the march and what we may be missing, describing as the benefits of a direct action event?
For me, I think it was connecting with others and being part of that, that togetherness. And, none of us are ever doing this for ourselves, right? So it's engaging with that kind of energy and seeing the dedication and passion reflected from those around us, and it brings the goods, right? I went to the Civil and Human Rights Museum in Atlanta yesterday, and they have this big, beautiful water feature there. And it had that Margaret Mead quote on the installation: "Never underestimate the power of a few dedicated people to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So I think for me, that is probably the best part of direct actions. It brings the goods, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something else that just cannot be underestimated, I think, in terms of helping people get out of their silos in this post-pandemic period. For such a long time, we were engaging in this forum and sort of in this arena alone. But to actually get out and experience that feeling of energy that is, truly is greater than the sum of its parts, is just so very important to lift the emotional and, psychological spirit, as well as just to be seen. We're at the mercy, for the most part, of corporate media or our own internal media, but to be able to get out, and who knows who's on the street at the time of day and the place that we're at. Just really an opportunity. And it's magnified, of course, tremendously if you're able to get the alternative local media present, or, do your own creation of media through live stream, or if you're lucky, you get somebody from the corporate media there, even if it's a weekly newspaper or something. Then, your ability to be heard and message shared is just quadrupled, if not increased tenfold for people. And the more that the visuals are there, the greater and a picture truly is worth, if it's the right picture, 1,000 words. Sometimes if you could just get a picture alone, many events related to war and anti-war and stuff that I've been involved with, the only thing that ever appeared in the corporate press was a picture, but it was a picture of signs or different people, and that was so powerful and it conveyed so much. And even an article covered in the newspaper couldn't match. It's great if you get both, but of course, just even an image. So for all those reasons, it's just so valuable and so important to have that as part of our toolkit, not to rely on it exclusively. There's many other tactics that should be done, need to be done, but it is one of the tools that need to be part of our nonviolent toolkit.
And I do want to do a little shout out to Fernanda and the what a powerhouse she was with her bullhorn. I mean, she had people paying attention and she didn't miss a beat.
Yeah,
Thank
what a
you.
house indeed. I just want to echo that sense of solidarity and empowerment that is fostering in-person events. And to what Greg was mentioning, also that is a great opportunity to reach out to a lot of people that might come across whatever prop or banners you might use for the Mayday event. And also something that came after the march is that maybe we should have QR codes or something big enough so that when people take pictures of us at the march or during the Mayday event, they can go to a website or somewhere where they can learn more or sign up.
Great concepts that I will add to our ingredient list as we plan for Mayday for Money. I wanted to address the question in the chat that we kind of jumped over and didn't explain super well. How did we all get to New York? How did this whole planning and collaboration with locals work? And where did out-of-towners stay? Did we organize? I'll just let Jenny or Katie or someone involved in the great logistical planning take over.
So we were able to secure housing from one of our affiliate leaders in New York, in the Brooklyn area, and she offered to put us up for the weekend. And then one of her other affiliate members was going to be out of town and said, "Why don't you just stay in our house?" I've went to I've been involved in doing some of these actions for a while. In the one that I went to, Katie and I actually went to it in 2013. They had put a call out to people in the local area asking them if they had space. Local churches and faith ethical organizations that have space are a great place to reach out to for allowing folks to stay there in the evenings. But that's how we did it. We have, it was a move to amend affiliate leader that arranged for us to have housing while we were there.
Thanks, Jenny. We'll look into something sort of like that, if possible, for our future organizing. I will go ahead and share more details from our planning of Mayday for Money. For those of you who have not heard, we are organizing our demonstration of people power over money power. And this is intended to be a coalition of organizations and people that come together and question the validity and usefulness of our current monetary system and propose a reform for the people and by the people. We're hoping these tag phrases go viral, if I may say so. The phrase democratize money, just money, and also money for the people and by the people. There is great need for all of these concepts to become more widespread. And I think that having a direct action demonstration like was seen with End Fossil Fuels will really hit home. And I wanted to share that people are really aware about fossil fuels being the cause of the global climate crisis. I was able to have a speaking time with some sixth graders who were learning about college and STEM fields, and I included some notes on climate change and asked them, what is the root cause? And they didn't skip a beat in telling me that it was fossil fuel combustion and money at the root cause. So our future generations are super aware and hopeful, and I think it's our role here now as people who've gone through some of these movements and training activities to pass the baton and show them some of the resources that they can use to make a difference as this goes. So, I stopped sharing way too soon, but this is kind of our planned route for our direct action. We are going to be envisioning a big rally in front of a park and then marching with all our banners at the same scale as it was in New York, hopefully, all the way over to our Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago. And this will all have to be collaborational and include a lot of education as to why are we talking about money, so people can really understand the significance of this day and why we're doing it on May. So a little bit of history. This was when Congress ceded the power of money creation to the banks. It was May 18th, 1913. And today, in the future when we march, we will seed a new future of money for the people. So that is a bit of our vision for the march. Some of our arts and banners are in the process of being created, and we're going to activate the wisdom in this room in a little bit. We have our program in the works, including speakers who know a great depth on the topic of money and history and monetary reform. And we're also hoping to include a lot of, as the panel has mentioned, those things that really spark the human soul, like art and music. We've drafted a couple of chants and have songs relating to money. And we're also going to be developing a collaborative mural, which I will explain with the help of this slide, that is a singing tree of a just and democratic economy. So a singing tree is actually a project that was invented. It's on the next slide. The Singing Tree mural project is an invitation to everyone on the planet to transcend disconnection and loneliness by having the fun of creating something together. And this was actually inspired by an 8-year-old schoolgirl who asked, what if the whole world could make a painting together? So this painting here is actually called The Singing Tree of What Makes America Great. And it was created by a collaboration of cops and Indigenous people, and it includes their collaborative vision of what makes America great. And I wanted to emphasize and have you take a peek at some of these ingredients on the mural that are stars and birds and leaves, because these are all pasted on and can be mailed in or drawn and digitalized and sent in to the core creation team so that many, many ideas can be represented. It will include, some of these, some of this process is a artistic co-creation, but it's also designed by a core group of people. It can be from like 5 or up to 20 people who are on the core design team. And we're actively recruiting for the singing tree of a just and democratic economy. So if you want to join that process, let me know. I am going to be the muralist facilitator for this. And a bit more about the process of how it's done. It's actually around 7 or 8 sessions. And these would be to be painting the background, and then the leaves can be pasted on later. So this is all part of our visual model and co-creation model, so that we have as many collaborators as possible on our movement for a just and democratic economy. So some of the concepts that we're going to be working with, of course, our core words are democratize money and just money, but it also extends even further than that to sustainable development, donut economics, right livelihood, and connects to a plethora of social justice movements. And like I was saying earlier, the quote from Donella Meadows, we don't know if we have the right answer for reform. So as we're envisioning this just and democratic economy, we need to be aware of democratic, including other movements who are coming to different solutions for a just democratic economy, like degrowth, universal basic income, etc. So I want to take a minute to ask our panelists what other art they saw, what moved their soul in this activity that we all went to in New York and DC. Katie, you're an artist. Say something.
Well, of course, the artwork in the signs was incredible. I took hundreds of pictures. Then they had, of course, the sculptures that some of the groups made. It was, but what always strikes me the most are the youth coming with their beautiful handmade signs, and the passion and the love and the thought they put into their work. So, in fact, I think it would make a great book to just take pictures of these beautiful signs.
Yeah,
I
and
still,
I think audio too, the chanting, the songs, the drums were powerful.
Yeah, the drumming was incredible. I do hope we can get some activity like that to be present. Of course, that's a tough one, because you also want to be able to hear chants. Perhaps we can share some of the chants that we heard, team on the ground.
Yeah, I can look at that. I believe there's a playlist. And yeah, the power of chanting songs cannot be undermined. For me, it was the biggest takeaway as far as arts and culture that I saw there. But also the banners and things people made themselves were also pretty impressive. But I would look for that playlist that was shared with us. Maybe that can inspire some chants for Mayday.
Well, and there's costumes as well. People dressed up, in DC, of course.
oh yeah,
We had our alternative Supreme Court justices, several of whom are on this call, who were wearing robes while holding the "We the People" sign in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And Fernanda had her, on top of wearing a Supreme Court Justice robe, the hat that
The
looked
head
like
thing from
head
the
thing that
Statue of
looked like
Liberty.
Statue of Liberty. So yeah, what a combo. But guess what? It attracts attention.
Yeah, I even had a lot of people take pictures of me because I wore that same costume to go lobby in Congress. So people were like, why are you dressed up to go lobby? Everyone usually just shows up in suits and, you know, the usual attire. So standing out is always an asset. And that leads us to our other question, which is, I drafted a better way of saying this. How do you think movements ought to balance the staying palatable and popular versus the being radical and raising eyebrows or like the shock value? Was there anything that you saw in these movements that was like turning people off versus really engaging them? So talk about that palatable, popular versus shock value. Anyone?
Well, I think it really depends. The balance really depends on the specific goals that you want to achieve and the context of your movement. But both have values and cons and pros as far as raising awareness and catalyzing for change. But yeah, it really depends on how radical you want to be seen, which is not terrible, but just something to consider.
The way I see it is I think it's real important. If you're on the street, you're trying to connect with people who are there. And they may, the assumption is they're not going to be as much on the other, relatively speaking. They're not going to know as much as we do. I mean, just think how much it is taken for people, particularly around monetary issues, to get to where, those of us are. So really, I think trying to design material signs, handouts that speak, that connect, that find connecting points with issues and concerns that we think people who will run into can connect with, and use the handout or the sign or whatever as opportunities to engage when there's opportunities to speak with, better opportunity in a rally, or getting ready for a rally than a march because you're on the move. But use those kinds of opportunities to ask people to sign the petition. But I think that the key is to think about the audience and trying to design material that speak to people you're going to run into. And the radical stuff can come later, but you just you never, as organizers, you never ever want to get too far out ahead of people who you're trying to organize, because it's always, as you're learning more and all, there's always the temptation to go more, further, deeper, wider, longer, higher, and then you lose touch with your base.
Right. Good concept to balance there. It's kind of, I see it a little bit connected as well to another question here in the chat about youth. I've been seeing a lot of the youth more attuned and connected to what other generations would call a little bit too radical or too out of that spectrum of what's popular. Perhaps it's a generational thing of who and where your audience is. Any thoughts, Jenny and Katie? You guys have family, so you can share what the youth think and how you can engage with older folks. What are the audience differences of how we approach this question?
Well, for the EFF March, young people were involved in the organizing of the event. They organized their own groups. It wasn't like, you found a couple of passionate people who were dedicated. And, again, with the End Fossil Fuels and the energized environmental climate justice that's going on right now, they are acutely aware of what's going on. So it's connecting. They were high school students organizing their high schools to come and signing their high schools up to be a part of this. Same with the college students. So connecting with those groups are really important. We had the drummers, for example, and there's science that that shows that heart and mind and heart connect through drumming. They connected with local drum groups that were in the area. So doing that and finding people who understand it. And like you said, when it comes to this monetary stuff, I mean, that's me go sometimes, your eyes glaze over because it's so hard to wrap your head around. Just like, not knowing that a corporation is considered a person and this is how they derive their power, not understanding that money is just being created out of thin air, and really understanding that, there's still, I feel like we're starting to get more of a cultural shift when it comes to the corporate power, but I'm not sure, there's still such a learning curve when it comes to understanding just money. But again, there's the urgency because it's, we're facing, species annihilation. And how are we going to, what kind of world do we want to create that needs to be created? And this is part of it. So I think there's that too. How do you educate at the same time as energizing? It's a big one.
Yeah, one way that we might simplify the topic of monetary reform is developing skits and theatrical performances. I think that was one thing that I also saw in the New York rally. You guys remember when the planet started rapping? I don't know who can tell our audience what that was all about. I've got a question in the chat about if we saw any theatrical performances, and that's what came to mind. But there was also singing and that other friend we made in New York. So come on and tell us what you saw.
Yeah, I might have a recording of that. Some young artists dressed up in a costume that resembled the Earth. It was like a planet Earth, and they were rapping. Can't recall exactly the lyrics, but it was pretty epic. A lot of people gather around to record. So definitely an eye-catching stunt if you have the skills for that to do a rap. But something that was pretty good to consider. And yeah, I also saw the question in the chat about the role of social media and I guess traditional media. And well, I from what I saw from the social media kit that they shared with us, it was pivotal. It had a pivotal role, especially in an era where corporate interests often dominate the narratives. Social media was the way that they connected with the audience, the young audience in particular. So that goes just to show how you need to use the power of social media as a powerful tool to enable you to mobilize people and try to bring them together as you're planning this Mayday for money. And regarding to social media, I mean to a mainstream media, on the other hand, I think that is more of a challenge, given the polarization and everything. I remember seeing articles that were talking really good about the march, and then some others that might be criticizing it. So it is hard to navigate that difficult climate right now. We try to send out press releases also for the DC events without much success. I'm unsure of why that might have been. But maybe if you want to do that, it would be wise to start doing, maybe start creating a good relationship with the editor or something, so that you can get your word out. Because if you do it like a few weeks before the event, it might be pretty tough to get a mention on traditional mainstream media. But yeah, just using your social media presence wisely, knowing your audience and trying to engage with them as you are planning your upcoming event.
Yeah, just to real quickly pick up on that. You know, the mainstream or corporate media, it is tough, particularly trying to plan something over the weekend. Their staff is even fewer in number. And so trying to plan something on Saturday, if there's a fire, you know, going on somewhere else, forget it. Because if it bleeds, it leads. And so anything that truly is not, you know, extremely visual, where you think where they think there's going to be a lot of people, or you don't have a headline or a person that's, you know, widely known, then it's rough. So what Alfonso said of trying to develop a relationship with an editor or a photographer, you know, it's important when you send out a press release. If you just send it to the press room, they don't, you know, maybe they'll send a reporter. There's no guarantee they're going to have a photographer. That's a separate department. So sending a press release to the photography, you know, whoever that is, okay, maybe a reporter won't show up, but a photographer will. And there again, maybe you'll get something out of it. So it's important if you're sending it to the Tribune or, you know, whatever other, you know, mainstream things in Chicago there are, that if it's a big paper that has its own separate photographers, send something separately to them.
And also, one of the things that they did with the EFF March, for example, is they had some art created, some posters for people to go out and do, to post it up, you know, and you can do that kind of thing in big cities, New York, you know, you couldn't really do it. You could do it in community centers around here, but like getting on community calendars, making connections again with colleges and universities and getting it on their community calendars. Like this, for example, is just a regular TV calendar. Like if you were having, like you said, some kind of street art, you know, improv money for, or, you know, I'm just throwing out an idea there, but getting in things like that. They have the neighborhood app, just doing some planning on that, connecting with organizations on the ground there that have already developed those relationships as well. When we were doing the DC action and planning that, these were kind of like, okay, we have this prop and we're going to be in DC lobbying. So how can we utilize this to get more attention to what we were trying to do and how we were trying to connect with the community? So it wasn't like we had this major planning on that scale. We were already planning this, and then we didn't want to squander this opportunity that we had with this prop and with this energy that we were going to be bringing. And so, you know, it just kind of flourished from that. But you know, you have the time to plan and do more deeper community building in the area as well. And since this is the Federal Reserve, would be like a long-term strategy can develop off of this action that y'all are planning, this Mayday call in the area as well.
Thank you, panelists, for all that wisdom. We are going to stay in touch because we need to find and organize with local people in Chicago. So if you have any contacts, we are kindly asking for that. That also goes for anyone in the audience. If you are near or have friends or allies in Chicago, we would love to stay connected to you so that we can utilize our connections for good. I'm taking notes here, and I've got a lot of good plans in action. What I think we're gonna do now is, I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat about our experience in New York and DC, and more about the how-tos of direct action. I suppose where we can go now is activate some of the wisdom in our Zoom room today and see what other ideas come to people's minds, as we've already presented a little bit about what Mayday for Money is going to be and what you would like to see added onto that. So I think we will remove all spotlights and go to gallery view, and anybody who wants to raise their hand and bring in some ideas or notes about what's already in the movement, come on up. Nice. Yeah, go ahead, Lucille.
I was writing it in the chat, so I'll just say it in my out loud voice that the last point that Jenny said, I think, I forget exactly your words, but it triggered this thought that it is our vision for this Mayday idea that it's not a one-off thing, you know, not if we're successful in Chicago, but when we're successful. Maybe it'll take 2 years, you know, but there are 12 cities where there are Federal Reserve banks, and we, you know, can do one next in St. Louis or in Memphis, or, you know, eventually New York, or, you know, each of the cities where there is one. And then eventually, you know, there are banks that are, you know, chartered banks in every city in town, and, you know, doing a, you know, Mondays for Mayday, like Fridays for the Future idea. You know, everywhere we have members is a little bit of the vision. And, you know, at this point, we're going to be really lucky if we pull off decently May in 2014. But, you know, and I think we'll be even luckier if we achieve our goal, our mission, before we get to the 12th Federal Reserve Bank. You know, let's not make it take so long. But it is a little bit, and I really credit Tabitha for some of the vision to begin with of this kind of work and the local work. I mean, Move to Mend already has all, you know, lots of chapters in different places, and we're not there yet. So anyhow, I think it's a lot of work, but, you know, it's little by little, and we need more young people in Chicago. So if any of you got those folks and friends, we're trying, but we need more anyhow. Thank you for triggering that vision idea, Jenny.
Any remaining questions for our panelists? Come on, Bo Young.
I did have one, considering the richness of the experience of the people on the panel. It's regarding the need for safety in a nonviolent demonstration, and a number of different worst case scenarios have already been mentioned. And I just wanted to bring up one that I was thinking that had not been mentioned, which is like, are there specific tactics that you can share to prepare for a possible confrontation with the police, or perhaps threats of arrest? Any thoughts on that, or even like counter demonstrators, how to deal with those very sensitive issues is something that's on my mind.
Yeah, I can try to take that question. So luckily we didn't face any serious confrontations at any of the two events, neither the one in New York or the ones in DC. but it's always good to know your limitations, that is physically or legally, how much you're willing to risk. And if people are not in the position to get arrested, be okay with that. And for those that are, just be mindful of the possible repercussions financially and legally and all that. Um, Again, we didn't have to plan for that because none of us were intending to get arrested at those marches, but there is lots of literature out there about how to establish jail support and bail funds and all that. But yeah, I guess the main takeaway or important suggestion is to know your limitations individually as a group, and just be open about those, communicate with each other.
And it doesn't hurt to have an attorney on hand that supports the movement with their number written on your arm. I learned that from Occupy.
And also, there's nonviolent direct actions where, you are risking arrest, right? Like in the Capitol for the Palestinian arrests, the officers came in and said, okay, you need to leave or you will be arrested. People who were not arrestable, you take very good notes if you're going to do a direct action where you're going to risk arrest. A lot of times, they just rather not arrest you because then that'll give you the desired public media coverage, right? So, even if you're planning to be arrested, sometimes they're not going to do that. If you are, chaining yourself to the front of the Federal Reserve, then chances are you're going to have an arrest. As far I was going to mention that the National Lawyers Guild has training for protesters, and as legal observers, they will come, and keep an eye. I know that there's other organizations that do it too, but National Lawyers Guild is definitely my preferred legal observer organization. They are definitely on the side of protesters' rights. You can't control every variable, but if you have permitted events, you're going to really lower your chances of having state violence. It's not always foolproof, but and then a lot of times it depends on what you're protesting, right? The BLM protesters, I witnessed a live stream where a journalist got shot in the face, and it was a permitted march. So I mean, and some are not. In the DC, they're very trained. The officers are very trained in protesters' rights. So there's that added security there. In New York, a lot of that same layers are there. But the march also had marshals where people volunteered to be the eyes, to keep an eye and make sure that if any dangers, and they coordinated those, with each other and communicated with each other. And that's really important, is that communication and, kind of staring off that trouble when you can.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, the last point that Jenny made, I think, is really important about marshals. Those are individuals from your group who will intentionally, be identified as that by wearing bandanas or something. And their role is to de-escalate anything that may arise between the marchers and the police, between the marchers and protesters, but also between marchers and other marchers. Because let's face it, there are agent provocateurs out there that oftentimes are designed to try to incite violence, to legitimize nonviolent and get you off message. So I've seen marshals who will identify individuals who, I mean, sometimes they're just nuts, but other times it sure seems like they are trying to provoke So that's where Marshall comes in. And it's very important that they know their role and have some formal training if you think that's needed.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and say that we are in the early stages of planning our Mayday for Money movement. And as collaborators come in, some of those hopefully with experience and demonstrations and direct action, we'll be able to expand this demonstration to include more of those shock value things, possibly arrests, possibly releasing turkeys outside the Fed. I don't know, someone suggested in comments. Sounds like fun. And we'll see what else we can do to get people's attention about democratizing money. And let's hear the question from Nick. Unmute, Nick.
I just kind of wanted to join the discussion as far as this thought of perhaps having any kind of arrestable type actions or anything. When we talked before about it, number one, I don't think there's anybody in our group who is, I'm not saying we're not dedicated for this, but who has just reached the point of no return where they want to throw their body in front of something or other and do anything of this sort. So as far as I put it at 0% chance that we will be doing anything that's arrestable there for any of us, and that's where it should be. Now, perhaps years from now in this movement, if it grows and grows, and people are really fed up and we're not getting results, some people will do things, but certainly not right now. And I love Greg's idea of having the marshals within the crowds from my anti-war activities or whatever. We always had that, and they can de-escalate. They can kind of let somebody know if they're kind of, if somebody is kind of egging you on from outside or whatever it is, just to let them alone or whatever, just to have an adult in the crowd. So I don't think that it's good to talk about this stuff now, but if anybody is being scared away because they think that maybe we're going to go out there and get arrested, that's just not what we're going to be doing. And I don't think there's anybody here who's calling for that, and I don't think that we should be trying to scare people away that might that might think about that. The other one, and it was I couldn't think of the name of it, but when we first brought it up about the lawyers, and I was thinking, who were those guys, the lawyers we always had at all the marches, and it was the National Lawyers Guild, and that's a great thing for us to reach out to right now. Hey, we're planning this in May. We want you to be involved, and that'll help us in just getting the word out about the event.
Thank you, Nick. We are definitely going to keep all that in mind, reach out to any and all who can support us in this movement. And I want to give us a little bit of hope to leave with, that I've been learning from this book, Why Civil Resistance Works. I think Greg shared it with me. He's always got good book recommendations. The Strategy and Logic of Nonviolent Conflict. And it actually says that from the 1900s to 2006, campaigns of nonviolent resistance were more than twice as effective as their violent counterparts in achieving their stated goals. So we don't need to go into any huge altercations. We just need to be present in the form of protest, boycotts, and nonviolent cooperation, and we can achieve the results that we want. Perhaps building through this future year's Mayday for Money, and then in future occupation movement events, and opening it to the audience if you have any comments or questions to add on to the conversation. Everybody's wisdom is welcome. about Gail or Mark Young? Timothy?
Did you want me to say something?
If you have some wisdom to share, Gail, you are welcome.
Well, I'm a US citizen, but I grew up and live in the Bahamas. I led 3 days of sustained demonstrations in 1993 against, we were trying to get them to ban longline fishing. The Minister of Fisheries wanted to bring in like over 20 boats to target shark fins. So I initiated that demonstration, and on the 3rd day, the Prime Minister came out and invited us into the House of Assembly to watch him read the legislation that would ban longline fishing. So that's the only experience I have with direct action.
That's a good one. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Tabitha.
I do apologize for not being. I've been sick the last few days, so but I hope you can hear me clearly. I want to share some of the history of the Federal Reserve Act, and then I have a question too. So part of the reason, the reason that May 18th is important is not because the legislation was actually passed that day. The Federal Reserve Act was passed 2 days before Christmas, back in 1913. And going into 1914, they were figuring out where these regional Federal Reserve banks were going to be located. The reason the May 18th date is important is because that's when 11 of the 12 regional banks signed their organizational certificates, and that essentially established them. That allowed them to do business. And the thing is that all 12 of the banks, New York being the one holdout there, didn't actually have their doors open until November 1914. But looking at those dates, 2 days before Christmas, November, and May, for a protest, it seemed to make sense to have our demonstration in May versus those other dates, because the power was actually granted to the banks at that date. So it made a lot of sense. But my question now is that we are, for our Mayday protest, we are debating whether to have the protest on a Friday, where there will be a lot of traffic downtown and people seeing us at the Federal Reserve Bank, but people might be working, so they might not be able to participate. Or our other option is to have it on a Saturday when more people might be able to join us, but there's not going to be probably as much traffic downtown or as much attention there. So I kind of want to throw it out to the panel and see if you guys have any, see if you could weigh in on that, and if you have any opinion. Thank you, guys.
Does anyone have a feel of how little traffic there would be on Saturday? I mean, is it like a ghost town on Saturday?
Stephen's a local who seems to have an idea. Tell us.
On Friday, if you want to get involved with the Fed people and have some of them out and looking and be curious, Friday is a really good day. Friday day is also the last day going to hang out afterwards. So if it's in the afternoon, that would be. Saturday is it can be almost a dead day. I don't want to quite say that, but it's the energy is not in there as much. It's like a laid back day psychologically in downtown Chicago. So I think that can be kept in mind. But it's a comfortable, it can be a day where you're to people if it's going to be educational. But if you're going to a difference and be seen and have energy in it, I think afternoon during the weekday might be better. I think in the Nick may want to speak to this too, but when we march, yeah, it was nice to have interaction with some Fed people, and on Saturday that just won't happen. But of safety and ease for the city and tranquility, Saturday would be a day, but they have their positives. So I'll be thinking about that. I tend to like the energy of a Friday though more than a Saturday right now. Nick has a hand up, and he's has the experience there too.
We talked about this before at the last meeting, I think, and it is a tough decision, and I think that we have to find out what's going on as far as conventions and things like that, because it's possible that and you know, the downtown area, not that I've been downtown a lot since COVID and the pandemic and everybody working from home and whatever, but it's really much less foot traffic and people working down there than it was before COVID. I mean, I imagine most cities are like this, but this is the only one I've been in. And so even on Friday, we're not going to have the traffic that we would have had a few years ago. And it's possible on Saturday, if there's some real happenings there, then it very well may be in May in Chicago, that the number of tourists or convention goers that are in town, or people that are in town, maybe even for a ball game or something or other. If the St. Louis Cardinals are playing or something, they bring thousands of their fans downtown whenever they're playing the Cubs. So anyway, those things, I guess that's what we really have to find out, if that, because that might make the Saturday better. If we want to do something where we go in and maybe present something to the people in the Federal Reserve, not in any kind of a law-breaking manner or anything, but just present something to them, then I don't think it's even open on Saturday. So,
yeah. One more comment is that Fernanda showed the route, the parade route. We've been a part of some unions, Chicago Teachers Union, and we protested the Fed and the Chicago Board of Ed and some other places. And we started at Union Park, which is a little west of downtown, and we went south from there and then into the Fed to protest and up near LaSalle Street and having a big place where we could all congregate. We went to the one I did with Chicago Teachers Union. We filled up an auditorium hall and just had rallies there and had speeches and talks there. So that could be a possibility. I think the route, though, starting Buckingham Palace and just north of the Art Institute would be fantastic if you can get the cooperation of the city. That's a lot of Main Street. There's a lot of activity in there, more than Chicago Teachers Union. You would, as Nick said, if the St. Louis Cardinals are in town, fans might be down by the Art Institute, and you might, maybe put them into the mark and screw the baseball game. Who knows? But if that would be a wonderful route to get, if you can.
Thank you. That's actually a pretty cool idea. I love that you're sharing the sports connection there. I've seen a couple of banners in protest being just dropped in like sports arenas recently regarding Palestine issues. So I think that might be a thing that we can do, is like get us all, our crew on the ground, some tickets to a game, and we'll have a pre-celebration to tell people about the march, and then spread the word, spread the word. That's what this is all about. It's how movements are built. One last thought from Nick. Go for it.
Thank you, Fernanda. Steve, maybe you can invite the Chicago Teachers Union to join us, because they have on record, I don't know if they've ever taken it off record, where they support the monetary reform of the NEED Act officially. So that's certainly, we should be making an outreach to them, and we can mention that we're going to be meeting with some teachers hopefully in a couple of weeks anyway, in the social justice thing, but they should all be members of the Chicago Teachers Union. Yeah,
no, that's very active there. Yeah, I thought of that. I put that in my bio too. I increased my bio. I was a member of the leadership, or the core group, or core called, at the Chicago Teachers Union. Started a study group for core and other interested people on banking. And so during marches, we had fairly sophisticated buttons like "Jailed bankers, not my children." You know, and they closed 50 schools at one time, and they were in overcrowded situations, and there were auction rate bonds and interest swaps done, and the Chicago Board of Ed didn't know how to play the bankers' games, and they lost $50 million. They ended up closing 50 schools and overcrowding, and so we had a whole movement to right-size our classrooms again. And so all of these marches take place downtown, and it's good energy. And if we can get a place to congregate in where people can come, and maybe there's interested people in Park where we're starting, and to have and build up an energy there, that would be good too. You know, we have a place where we want a little spot on the park or something like that, for an hour or two before we begin march or something.
Sounds like a good plan. We might also include that. This has been our Coffeehouse time. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much for the panelists and the audience for your insight onto this planning process. I'll stay on for a little bit because I want to also, but everyone can hop off if this is all the time you have allotted. Thank you so much to Move to Amend. Yes, we did get a lot of good notes on what to plan for, and perhaps some parallel events may be taking place in international settings. I see we have still some international folks here on the call. Jawad, hopefully some of this was relevant to you, and you can maybe participate by just sharing our live streams as we do these demonstrations.
Yeah, maybe, I'll just throw out a wild idea. But those people at the AMI conference recently, in the Korean example, was rented out a theater, and they played a movie, and they used that as an educational route to bring people into the movie. I'm wondering if we can have some little presentations, theatrically or whatnot, and try to bring people in. That might have to be something else. That doesn't feel very March oriented, so be quiet on that one.
Movies can be very educational. I would recommend the Shillings from Heaven that someone was recently shared. Really good movie. Really on good. Closing remarks, I'll leave the floor open for any of our Move to Amend panelists. And I did want to add that I put in the link to our Mayday page. I'll plug it in here again. so that you can go ahead and click on volunteer, and we can get you in the loop on some of our committee work to plan this great big event. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you too.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I would just like to share a thought. So I recently was visiting Fernanda in El Paso, and she had a basket weaving class. And I couldn't but notice the strength of the catso, which is the fabric that we were using to weave the baskets. And that made me think of how important it is to weave a united front that champions the elimination of corporate rights and fight for a fair and just monetary transition. So with that in mind, I just wanted to again thank Alliance for Just Money for this opportunity, and I hope that we can continue collaborating and supporting each other. And yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. And I shared it once. I want to share it again. It's Beautiful Trouble. And I just love this. It's toolbook. It's a toolbox for activists and direct actions. And it's just fun and vibrant ways to engage, educate, and agitate. And I'm looking forward to the Mayday event.
Onwards.
Yeah, it was nice to be with our brothers and sisters from Move to Men, so that was great.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned a lot from y'all at the Radical Gathering. And you know, those videos, showing those and, you know, raising the awareness of what's going on is really powerful, because I had no idea. Like I said, still it's like you know, sometimes it's hard to wrap my head around, but it's necessary to know what's going on with our systems. So thank you all.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. You guys have a
Thank
wonderful night.
you. Let's
Can't wait to go
all
to Chicago.
say thank you. We'll see you in Chicago. All righty.
Good Labor Town.